Friends, if you want to watch super hit movie Terrifier 3 in English, then you must like this video if you are visiting our channel for the first time. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Friends, in today's video, the movie we are going to talk about is called Terrifier 3. We will talk about what this movie is and where you can watch it all. Interesting facts about this movie. In today's video, I am going to tell you, I am also going to give you all the information on which platform or on which satellite channel you will get to watch this movie. Also, we will talk in detail about the technical department, music department, pre-production filming, post-production budget, box office collection of this film. We will also talk about the story of this film, and I will also give you a small review of the story of this film. Apart from this, we will discuss about the facts of this film's storyline, star cast, actors' performance in the film, and which character has played which role. That's why I request you friends to watch this video till the end, so let's start the video. Terrifier 3 is a 2024 American Christmas supernatural slasher film written, edited, and directed by Damien Leone. It is the sequel to Terrifier 2, 2022, and the third installment in the Terrifier film series. The film stars David Howard Thornton, LaVera, Elliott Fullam, and Samantha Scafidi. On the days leading up to Christmas, the story follows Sienna Shaw as she attempts to rebuild her life. At the same time, Art the Clown is pursuing her alongside his new accomplice, a possessed Victoria Hayes. Following the critical and commercial success of Terrifier 2, Leone began writing for the third film with plans for an overarching narrative. Leone wanted to feature Victoria more prominently, as he regretted leaving the character underdeveloped in the first film. Principal photography began in February 2024 on a $2 million budget and wrapped that April. Terrifier 3 premiered at Fantastic Fest on September 19, 2024, and was theatrically released in the United States on October 11th by Cineverse and Iconic Events Releasing. The film received generally positive reviews from critics and has grossed over $76 million worldwide, becoming the highest-grossing unrated film of all time. Plot: after being beheaded by Sienna Shaw, Art the Clown's headless body decapitates a cop responding to the incident and makes its way to the asylum where survivor Victoria Hayes, now possessed by the little pale girl, has just given birth to Art's own head. After reattaching his head to his body, Art and Victoria kill a nurse and a guard before entering an abandoned house and going into hibernation. 5 years later, Sienna is released from a mental health center to stay with her aunt Jess, her husband Greg, and their daughter Gabby, who idolizes Sienna but has no knowledge of the events she endured. Sienna is suffering from survivor guilt and frequently has hallucinations of her deceased best friend Brooke, whose death she feels responsible for. She struggles to reconnect with her younger brother Jonathan, who is now in college trying to move on with his life. Art and Victoria are woken from their slumber when two demolition workers stumble upon them in the house. The duo kills the workers, and Victoria begins working on a costume, while Art ventures off on another killing spree. Art meets a Santa Claus impersonator at a bar, where Art kills him and takes his Santa costume. Art then poses as a mall Santa and uses explosives disguised as presents to kill several people at the mall, many of them children. Sienna thinks she sees Art at the mall in disguise before the explosion, but does not tell her family since she thinks they would not believe her and is unsure herself if it was simply a hallucination or not. Sienna visits Jonathan at his university. There she meets Jonathan's roommate Cole and his girlfriend Mia, who hosts a true crime podcast. Mia pressures Sienna and Jonathan to participate in an interview about the Miles County massacre, but Sienna lashes out. Sienna confesses to Jonathan that she thinks Art is still alive, and shows Jonathan the letters he wrote to her while she was in the psychiatric hospital, which state that demons can be reborn and possess hosts like Victoria. She also tells Jonathan she plans to return to the Terrifier haunted attraction to retrieve her father's sword. Art arrives at the university and kills Mia and Cole with a chainsaw. Sienna learns about the mall killings on the news and panics, demanding Jonathan return home from college and warning the family they are not safe. Greg leaves to collect Jonathan while Sienna falls asleep. She dreams of her father and of the angels crafting the armor from her warrior costume that he drew for her. Sienna wakes to hear Jess and her husband downstairs discussing what they should do about her worsening condition. When she walks into the dining room, Sienna instead finds Art and Victoria decorating Greg's decapitated and eviscerated body pinned to the wall. Sienna runs but is incapacitated by Art with a mallet. As Sienna regains consciousness, she sees Jess tied up across from her, and Greg's severed head used as the star on their Christmas tree. Victoria shows them a skinless head being consumed by rats, telling her it is Gabby's. Art and Victoria then kill Jess by hammering a tube into her throat, forcing rats down it and slitting her throat. Art suddenly enters with Gabby as a hostage, and Victoria claims to Sienna that the head is Jonathan's. Victoria places a crown of thorns on Sienna's head and tries to possess her, but she resists because her will is not yet broken. Victoria tells Sienna to open her Christmas gift from Gabby. Sienna, however, breaks free, cuts Art's throat, and decapitates Victoria with her father's sword, which she hid in the present. Victoria's pool of blood burns through the floor and creates a portal to hell. As Sienna and Art fight, Gabby falls in and holds onto the edge. Sienna finally gains an advantage by impaling Art to a wall, but leaves him in order to save Gabby, who eventually falls into the abyss with the sword. Art flees through a window, and Sienna looks down at her wounded hands as they heal, vowing to find and rescue Gabby. In the final scene, Art is seen boarding a bus with a passenger and driver who are disturbed by his appearance. Cast: David Howard Thornton as Art the Clown, Lauren LaVera as Sienna Shaw, Jonathan's older sister, and the one who decapitated Art in the previous film and now is released from a mental health center. Luciana Elisa Quiñones as young Sienna, Elliott Fullam as Jonathan Shaw, Sienna's younger brother, who is now in college and trying to move on with life after the events that he had experienced. Samantha Scafidi as Victoria Hayes, the younger sister of Art's victim, Tara Hayes, and the sole survivor of the events of the first film, who becomes possessed by the little pale girl and acts as Art's partner in crime. Margaret Ann Florence as Jess Shaw, Sienna and Jonathan's aunt, who is the older sister of their mother, Barbara. Bryce Johnson as Greg Shaw, Jess's husband and Gabby's father. Antonella Rose as Gabby Shaw, Jess and Greg's daughter, and Sienna and Jonathan's cousin who idolizes Sienna. Chris Jericho as Adam Burke, an orderly in the Miles County Psychiatric Hospital. Daniel Roebuck as Santa Claus. Tom Savini as a bystander. Jason Patrick as Michael Shaw. Sienna and Jonathan's father, who is an artist that died from a brain tumor. Chrissy Fox as Jennifer. Alexa Blair Robertson as Mia, Cole's girlfriend, and a true crime enthusiast obsessed with the Miles County Massacre. Mason McCartia as Cole, Jonathan's dorm mate. Stephen Cofield Jr. as Officer Evans. Clint Howard as Smokey. Annie Letterman as Graven Image co-host. Bradley Stryker as Eddie. John Abrahams as Dennis. Phil Falcone as Tom the bus driver. Kaylee Hyman as Brooke, Sienna's deceased best friend who appeared as a hallucination to haunt her. John Sanders as the demon voice. Production. This film featured the character of Vicky Hayes, the heroine turned villainess of Terrifier 2016, in a much more prominent role compared to the 2016 film and its 2022 sequel, with Damien Leone's biggest regret with the first film being leaving her underdeveloped. The original ending of Terrifier 2 set up Vicky's demise in the opening of this film, but Leone deemed it to be too similar to the concept of Malignant 2021. While conceptualizing the birthing scene, he decided he wanted to keep Vicky alive and give her significant character development as he enjoyed working with Samantha Scafidi. In December 2023, it was confirmed that Chris Jericho was set to appear in Terrifier 3. In April 2024, it was confirmed that Daniel Roebuck was set to appear as Santa Claus in Terrifier 3. In May 2024, it was announced that Tom Savini was set to appear in Terrifier 3. In June 2024, it was announced that Jason Patrick was set to appear in Terrifier 3. In July 2024, it was announced that Antonella Rose, Chrissy Fox, Clint Howard, and John Abrahams were set to appear in Terrifier 3. In May 2023, it was announced that Terrifier 3 was expected to begin filming in November or December 2023. Principal photography began in February 2024 and wrapped in April 2024, with additional scenes completed in New York until early mid-June. Leone chose to shoot the film using Panavision anamorphic lenses with the intention of making the film look like a vintage John Carpenter movie. The film cost $2 million to produce, up from its predecessor's $250,000 budget. Variety described the budget as still wildly low by Hollywood standards. Release: Terrifier 3 was theatrically released in the United States on October 11, 2024, by Cineverse, who acquired distribution rights in June 2023, setting it for a wide release in collaboration with Iconic Events Releasing, with an exclusive streaming debut on the former's Screambox service. It was originally scheduled for October 25th, but was moved forward to its new date in May 2024. The film premiered on opening night at the 2024 Fantastic Fest on September 19th. In select AMC theaters, the film played as a double feature with Terrifier 2, followed by a music video presentation of the film's official song, a work of art by Ice Nine Kills, featuring System of a Down bassist Shavo Odagian, which was released as a single in tandem with the film's theatrical release on October 11th. Cineverse spent under $5 million to acquire and market the film. Advertising costs were $500,000, as the film was largely marketed to Cineverse's Bloody Disgusting fan base and 80 million streaming subscribers across 30 channels, and additional acquisition costs were covered by a loan of at most $3.67 million, with the lender receiving 15% of royalties, capped at $6.4 million. The film forewent submission for a Motion Picture Association rating to avoid an NC-17 rating. Home media. In Australia, the film is set to be released by Umbrella Entertainment in a 4-film box set, alongside All Hallows Eve, Terrifier, and Terrifier 2 on Ultra HD Blu-ray, DVD, and VHS on January 31, 2025. Reception. Box office. As of November 8, 2024, Terrifier 3 has grossed $52.3 million in the United States and Canada and $21 million in other territories, for a worldwide total of $73.2 million. In the United States and Canada, Terrifier 3 was projected to gross $10 to $11 million from 2,514 theaters in its opening weekend, with one estimate by Box Office Pro at $12 to $18 million. The film made $8.2 million on its first day, including $2.6 million from Thursday night previews. It debuted to $18.9 million, topping the box office. As an indie film, Terrifier 3 notably placed ahead of DC Comics' holdover Joker, Folie à Deux. Theater chains treated the unrated film as an R-rated film, turning down attendees 17 or younger if unaccompanied by a parent or guardian. Two distribution sources speculated that more people saw the film than reported, theorizing that a noticeable bump in the earnings for The Wild Robot that weekend was the result of teenagers buying tickets to The Wild Robot and then sneaking into screenings of Terrifier 3. The trend continued into the film's first Monday, during which it earned $2.6 million, bringing its 4-day total to $21.5 million. In its second weekend, the film made $9.3 million, a drop of 51%, finishing in third, 36. The film then made $4.8 million its third weekend, finishing in sixth. In France, the film opened number 1 box office on its first day with 45,000 admissions, more than other horror films like Saw X, 35,000, and Smile, 33,000. In Poland, Terrifier 3 sold nearly 140,000 tickets during its opening weekend. Critical response. On the review aggregator website Rotten Tomatoes, 77% of 115 critics' reviews are positive, with an average rating of 6.5/10. The website's consensus reads, "Taking an axe to Yuletide cheer and everything else in its path, Terrifier 3 is a bloody, fantastic stocking stuffer for the holiday season." Metacritic, which uses a weighted average, assigned the film a score of 61 out of 100 based on 18 critics, indicating generally favorable reviews. Audiences polled by CinemaScore gave the film an average grade of B on an A+ to F scale, while those surveyed by PostTrack gave it a 76% overall positive score, with 59% saying they would definitely recommend it. Writing for Slant Magazine, Rocco T. Thompson described the storyline as being half-formed, but praised the leading performances and the practical effects. Thompson highlighted Scaffidi's performance in particular. It's the surprisingly spooky Victoria Hayes who emerges as the film's villain MVP, what with the overwhelming Art often playing second banana in their scenes together. Through it all, Scafidi exudes a chilling sense of evil from beneath pounds of prosthetics. Thompson also noted that LaVera brought emotional intensity to the narrative in her portrayal. In a review for the Austin Chronicle, Richard Whitaker highlighted the film's continued world-building, the transgressiveness of the Art character, and Vicky's expanded importance as a villain in the series. Similarly, Matthew Jackson of the AV Club praised the script and the performances of Thornton and LaVera. Jackson stated that LaVera cements herself as one of horror's brightest new stars with her second time out as Sienna Shaw. In a positive review for IndieWire, Allison Foreman highlighted the script as confident and comfortable. She praised the development of both Sienna and Vicky, describing the latter as Leone's secret weapon. Foreman states that the film gives the two characters plenty of story to carry. International responses: France's classification committee banned viewers under the age of 18 from seeing the film, the first time such a ban had been issued since the release of Saw 3 in 2006. There were reports of audiences vomiting and leaving theaters after watching the film's opening scene in the United Kingdom. 2 people reportedly passed out during a screening of the film in Australia. Sequel. In 2023, Damien Leone spoke about plans for a potential Terrifier 4. In September 2024, Leone confirmed that Terrifier 4 was in development. Art and Victoria shack up in an abandoned home, while final girl Sienna, Lauren LaVera, tries to deal with the trauma enacted by the last film. She returns from a psychiatric hospital to live with her Aunt Jessica, Margaret Ann Florence, her husband Greg, Bryce Johnson, and their kid Gabby, Antonella Rose, who is clearly in this film just to be put in harm's way, or maybe Art's way. Sienna's brother Jonathan, Elliott Fullam, is in college dealing with his own PTSD, but this too is merely an excuse for more victims for Art to skin alive. To say that the plotting in Terrifier 3 is thin would be an understatement, and yet there's so much of it. Scene after scene of Sienna talking about her trauma unfold in a manner that I feel is almost designed to make you desperate to watch another Art the Clown act of cruelty just to alleviate the boredom. And cruel they are. Much has already been made of the kill scenes in Terrifier 3 and how blatantly they're trying to push the boundaries of taste more than even the first 2 controversial films. They're so over-the-top ridiculous in their design and execution that I don't really take them seriously. Still, I wouldn't argue with anyone offended by a movie that is willing to go where this one does, which is not just to mutilation and torture, but across boundary lines that even most horror fans maintain, including the deaths of children. So why not write off Terrifier 3 entirely? 2 reasons. 1, the DIY aspect of the film reminds me of genre flicks I loved when I first discovered the genre, and one of the reasons I still love horror. It doesn't gatekeep like other genres, allowing anyone with the right passion to make a movie like this for reportedly under $2 million. A number it will cross in profit before school is out on Friday. 2, Thornton is legitimately phenomenal, giving what is a very physical performance that's more reminiscent of silent comedy than modern horror. And adding Victoria to chatter away reduces the silent killer's tension in this one. Don't do that for the 4th film again, Damien. So, while Leone and his maniacal alter ego still have some work to do, mostly in the writing department, I'm going to keep rooting for Terrifier to figure it out. After all, everybody loves a clown. Some movies can't logically live, and even less thrive, outside of super dedicated countercultures. Anything too dark or violent, or even too sexual, is, by definition, condemned to live on the genre cinema festival circuit and streaming platforms. The gore-soaked Terrifier movie should not be the hottest thing in theaters. But here we are. Terrifier 3 has not only obliterated the level of popularity of its predecessor, but it obliterated costlier competition and became somewhat of a cultural phenomenon. It's more fucked up than a lot of fucked up stuff I've seen, and normies love it. What the hell is going on? I have not seen Terrifier 1 and 2, but you don't need to in order to appreciate Terrifier 3 for what it is. It's basically the story of a demonic clown named Art, David Howard Thornton, who comes back from a decapitation, not kidding, in order to haunt his old nemesis Sienna Shaw, Lauren LaVera, And by that, I mean kill, desecrate, and mutilate the bodies of everyone she's ever known. Seriously, that dude and his ghoul Victoria care about nothing except absolute fucking carnage. Is Terrifier 3 a good movie? Kind of. I mean, it functions more like a haunted house than an actual movie. But Terrifier 3 is technically impeccable and creates more genuine thrills than your standard jump scare factory. It's the small things, like how it uses sound. In the opening scene, Art walks into a home on Christmas Eve, dresses as Santa. And just the sound of his footsteps juxtaposed to the context of the movie was enough to get me creeped out. Not going to spoil what, but there's a cool rocking chair trick soon after, too. Screenwriter and director of Terrifier 3, Damien Leone knows he's in the spectacle business, and it's exactly what he provides. I'm surprised that such an utterly brutal film is enjoyed by the masses, but it is so brutal that it kind of becomes conceptual again at some point. There's so much gore and violence early on that it stops having an effect at some point. Nothing got me after the broken glass masturbation scene until the final confrontation. But the intent behind the torture, mutilation, and murder kind of does. Let me explain. On top of being a genocidal maniac, Art is also really cruel, especially towards Sienna, as his goal with her is not murder and death, but rather to force her to abandon her convictions. He wants her to turn evil. His efforts culminate in a lengthy and painful final confrontations where the ideas Art has to torture Sienna are creepier than the torture themselves. For example, he keeps slapping her behind the head. It's not unnecessary, and the slaps are so hard and loud, it becomes unnerving. The appeal of raw, unfiltered violence. I mean, there's not much to Terrifier 3, but a series of senseless graphic murders, so isn't all that much to talk about there. It's not deep, but it's thrilling in its own roundabout way. I understand why the crowds have stampeded to see this movie unlike they've stampeded to any gore horror movie before. It's the movie your parents thought Texas Chainsaw Massacre of Friday the 13th was. It's a cultural boogeyman. It's the adult equivalent than coursing through a haunted house as an 8-year-old kid. People are going in not expecting a movie, but some kind of viral endurance test they're heard about online, and Terrifier 3 is very honest about that and the nature of what it's supposed to deliver. Even if the characters are super well written for what they are, there's no attempt at complex emotional storytelling whatsoever, and only 2 people are granted a semblance of interiority: Sienna and her niece, Gabby, Antonella Rose. The rest is fair game for the murder and destruction we've all paid to see. I'm just glad that not only a movie like Terrifier 3 exists, but that it's way more popular than it has any right to be. It's not a quick cash-in, it's kind of a one-trick pony, but it's really smart and thorough in the way it delivers its fastball. Is it ugly? Absolutely. Is it depraved? You bet your ass it is. Is it revolting? The level of abuse at the end warrants the use of this qualifier. But Terrifier 3 is boogeyman. It's an object of fearsome power, and it's not all just in the way it's presented. It packs a mean punch and serves its purpose. The first time I saw Art the Clown, villain of the Terrifier franchise, it was a costume worn by a YouTube movie reaction video maker, Ash Khan, Just Trust Ash Javdani. He likes to dress up in costumes for certain movies he likes, and sometimes for holidays. What I learned about Terrifier through Ash Khan's Halloween costume is that Art is a spooky and iconic character, the perfect look for a serial killer. Ads for Terrifier 3 made by the movie's marketing team sold a bloody good time, and that's what I got from Terrifier 3. The latest in a series of horror films garnering high acclaim for its gore and practical effects. What I did not expect was a Christmas movie, or a comic book movie. That last part might only make sense to people who have seen the last 2, but not really. After bouncing around in time between re-establishing the villain's origins on this plane of existence and subsequent murders, the Satan-spawned murderer Art the Clown, David Howard Thornton, The Mean One 2022, Steamboat 2025, finds himself on the trail of Sienna Shaw, stuntwoman Lauren LaVera, Split 2016, Not for Nothing 2022, a scarred survivor from one of his earlier murder sprees. She was blamed for murders Art committed, but her brother Jonathan gave sworn testimony in court, which kept her away from a life sentence in prison. Instead, she spent 5 years in a mental institution. Serena was finally able to get out for the Christmas holidays, and there are presents for her waiting at the home of her Aunt Jess, Margaret Ann Florence, The New Daughter, 2009, Family Games, 2018, her husband Greg, Bryce Johnson, Hulk vs. Cat Animated, 2009, Popular TV The WB, and daughter Gabby, child actress Antonella Rose, Fear the Walking Dead, TV AMC. There were other elements that made it seem like I was watching a live-action independent comic book from the 80s and 90s. Representation of the female form in fiction, the biblical struggle made physical, and the hoary chosen one storyline truly brought me back to the days when someone would always find a comic like this problematic, and the book would need defense from the CBLDF, Comic Book Legal Defense Fund. But times have changed, and it's included in the movie, and I was here for it, a special treat that made dealing with the foolishness of the satanic panic all worthwhile. Choice cuts. Blink and you'll miss cameos from Jason Patric, nepotism legend Clint Howard, pro wrestler Chris Jericho, and the late Tom Savini, one of the American pioneers in practical gore effects. Knowing everyone is relatively new to the game is amazing. I can say the future of movies is bright with stars like these. Lauren LaVera is such an expressive actress and an amazing stunt woman, and we're glad to have her. I understand rubbing glass is a positively charging effect. Not so in this movie, as its effect is purely negative, and the scene featuring this instance was designed for the most twisted of human passing creatures. Art has a sense of response and retribution to his kills, making sure your kill will be unique to something you said recently. Priceless quotes. Pass the rice. You'll ask yourself, who's saying that when everyone else is already talking? They put steam from the inner body heat in one of the corpses, you guys. Steam. Because the temporal setting for the story is Christmas, Terrifier 3 counts as a Christmas movie. That puts it in the same boat with all three versions of Black Christmas, 1974, 2006, and 2019, Krampus, 2015, and Gremlins, 1984. I do not own, let alone clutch at, pearls. When done right, bad taste is the best taste. The problem with Terrifier 3, the latest in the hyper-violent splatter-slasher franchise from Damien Leone, is not the gore. Don't get me wrong, the warning should be clear. The faint of heart ought to steer clear of this one. The squishy, bloody, extreme to the limits of extreme violence is not what makes the Terrifier films objectionable. No, that is the main draw. It is the reason why a niche audience propelled the third entry to the #1 spot at the domestic box office. The gore of it all is just fine. In fact, it seems integral to Leone's macabre vision of the modern slasher. Some would argue that the extremes of our contemporary media world and the postmodern sensibilities that have desensitized spectators and created a distance between them and the horrors of the world requires that a modern iteration of the slasher icon pull absolutely no punches, nor stabs, nor sawings, nor gunshots. Others would argue that the absurd lengths to which Leone will go for the sake of the kill harks back to the Grand Guignol Theatre. I would hazard to claim that both arguments could be true at once. The problem with Terrifier 3 is that, from my view, it has entirely lost the plot. What was once terrifying has been reduced to gags bordering on the slapstick. The grand exaggerations of the Grand Guignol have been flattened to a runny tonal mess. The series' previous entry, which is its apex, operated in an elevated arena of genre hybridity. The sheer brutality of the gore film was interspersed with genuine melodrama that centered on a young woman, Sienna, Laura LaVera, who becomes haunted both by the killer clown that Leone angles to be the next slasher icon and the grief of her deceased father. Sienna's relationships with her mother and brother are strained, but there is a humanism to how the family nevertheless works to keep each other afloat. It is a humanism which is challenged by the pure nihilism of Art the Clown, David Howard Thornton. This dialectical relationship between love and evil, humanism and nihilism, is balanced imperfectly by Leone in Terrifier 2. There is still something off-key about the film, juxtaposing emotional beats with shocking death. It doesn't all come together in the end, but the film is admirable for attempting something. Terrifier 3 yada-yadas through the melodrama in order to get to the next bloody, drawn-out set piece. 5 years after the events of the previous film, Sienna is checked out of a psychiatric hospital and moves in with her aunt, uncle, and niece. Her brother, Jonathan Elliott Fullam, attends a nearby college. It is a new setting without new family dynamics. Jonathan and Sienna's roles are simply reversed, in that it is now Sienna trying to convince Jonathan that the threat of Art the Clown is real. And the newly added family members do not deepen a sense of family melodrama. They are clearly here to be mere obstacles in Art's path of total destruction. As with many horror movies before it, the film also goes for the holiday-themed gimmick. Set during the Christmas season, our mute killer eventually dons full Santa Claus gear and stalks a local shopping mall Santa display. It is a perfunctory element that allows the film to cut into an interesting trailer, but nothing more. Leone's ability to craft truly upsetting and tactile visual effects won't be held under scrutiny here. There is a reason these films sell to a specific sect of the horror fanbase, and Leone's craft is it. Not to mention that Leone grows as a visual filmmaker with each entry in the franchise. Terrifier 2 was a huge step up from the grimy lo-fi first film. With Terrifier 3, Leone and DP George Stuber block and shoot set pieces exceedingly well. Even as the kills get redundant and overtly comedic in a way that hurts the film, the visual design of them remain top-notch. As for the redundancy and the comedy, these leave this 2-hour film feeling as bloated and overstuffed as the big sack of toys that Art trudges around with for half the film. There is something inherently unsettling about the incongruous conflation of a comedic clown performance with the depiction of brutal death. Incongruity can produce humor, but also can produce discomfort. The unfortunate reality with Terrifier 3 is that it intentionally goes for the comedy at the same time that it professes to show an evil so purely impure that it is literally inhuman. That balance may work for the adolescents cackling in the theater while Art brutally dismembers a random innocent person. I get it. I also was once a teen horror fan. But it doesn't work when the franchise has established certain goals and drives pertaining to this exact balance between light and dark, innocence and evil. I didn't watch Terrifier 2 and think Leone was asking us to laugh along with Art's pantomime. With this third film, I think it is the only way one could derive enjoyment from the brutality. Having recently listened to an interview with Chris McGurk, the CEO of the film's distributor, Cineverse, this new tone does appear to be an intentional, creative, corporate choice. Not only does McGurk want Art the Clown to be the next Freddy Krueger on a marketing level, but he wants Art to act like Freddy Krueger too. Just replace the crappy one-liners with a crappy mime routine. The selling point becomes gross-out comedy, but the truth is, it's not all that funny. Art has a sense of response and retribution to his kills, making sure your kill will be unique to something you said recently. Priceless quotes. Pass the rice. You'll ask yourself, who's saying that when everyone else is already talking? They put steam from the inner body heat in one of the corpses, you guys. Steam. Because the temporal setting for the story is Christmas, Terrifier 3 counts as a Christmas movie. That puts it in the same boat with all three versions of Black Christmas, 1974, 2006, and 2019, Krampus, 2015, and Gremlins, 1984. I do not own, let alone clutch at, pearls. When done right, bad taste is the best taste. The problem with Terrifier 3, the latest in the hyper-violent splatter-slasher franchise from Damien Leone, is not the gore. Don't get me wrong, the warning should be clear. The faint of heart ought to steer clear of this one. The squishy, bloody, extreme to the limits of extreme violence is not what makes the Terrifier films objectionable. No, that is the main draw. It is the reason why a niche audience propelled the third entry to the #1 spot at the domestic box office. The gore of it all is just fine. In fact, it seems integral to Leone's macabre vision of the modern slasher. Some would argue that the extremes of our contemporary media world and the postmodern sensibilities that have desensitized spectators and created a distance between them and the horrors of the world requires that a modern iteration of the slasher icon pull absolutely no punches, nor stabs, nor sawings, nor gunshots. Others would argue that the absurd lengths to which Leone will go for the sake of the kill harks back to the Grand Guignol theater. I would hazard to claim that both arguments could be true at once. The problem with Terrifier 3 is that, from my view, it has entirely lost the plot. What was once terrifying has been reduced to gags bordering on the slapstick. The grand exaggerations of the Grand Guignol have been flattened to a runny tonal mess. The series' previous entry, which is its apex, operated in an elevated arena of genre hybridity. The sheer brutality of the gore film was interspersed with genuine melodrama that centered on a young woman, Sienna, Laura LaVera, who becomes haunted both by the killer clown that Leone angles to be the next slasher icon and the grief of her deceased father. Sienna's relationships with her mother and brother are strained, but there is a humanism to how the family nevertheless works to keep each other afloat. It is a humanism which is challenged by the pure nihilism of Art the Clown, David Howard Thornton. This dialectical relationship between love and evil, humanism and nihilism, is balanced imperfectly by Leone in Terrifier 2. There is still something off-key about the film, juxtaposing emotional beats with shocking death. It doesn't all come together in the end, but the film is admirable for attempting something. Terrifier 3 yada-yadas through the melodrama in order to get to the next bloody, drawn-out set piece. 5 years after the events of the previous film, Sienna is checked out of a psychiatric hospital and moves in with her aunt, uncle, and niece. Her brother, Jonathan, Elliott Fullam, attends a nearby college. It is a new setting without new family dynamics. Jonathan and Sienna's roles are simply reversed, in that it is now Sienna trying to convince Jonathan that the threat of Art the Clown is real. And the newly added family members do not deepen a sense of family melodrama. They are clearly here to be mere obstacles in Art's path of total destruction. As with many horror movies before it, the film also goes for the holiday-themed gimmick. Set during the Christmas season, our mute killer eventually dons full Santa Claus gear and stalks a local shopping mall Santa display. It is a perfunctory element that allows the film to cut into an interesting trailer, but nothing more. Leone's ability to craft truly upsetting and tactile visual effects won't be held under scrutiny here. There is a reason these films sell to a specific sect of the horror fanbase, and Leone's craft is it. Not to mention that Leone grows as a visual filmmaker with each entry in the franchise. Terrifier 2 was a huge step up from the grimy lo-fi first film. With Terrifier 3, Leone and DP George Stuber block and shoot set pieces exceedingly well. Even as the kills get redundant and overtly comedic in a way that hurts the film, the visual design of them remain top-notch. As for the redundancy and the comedy, these leave this 2-hour film feeling as bloated and overstuffed as the big sack of toys that Art trudges around with for half the film. There is something inherently unsettling about the incongruous conflation of a comedic clown performance with the depiction of brutal death. Incongruity can produce humor, but also can produce discomfort. The unfortunate reality with Terrifier 3 is that it intentionally goes for the comedy at the same time that it professes to show an evil so purely impure that it is literally inhuman. That balance may work for the adolescents cackling in the theater while Art brutally dismembers a random innocent person. I get it. I also was once a teen horror fan. But it doesn't work when the franchise has established certain goals and drives pertaining to this exact balance between light and dark, innocence and evil. I didn't watch Terrifier 2 and think Leone was asking us to laugh along with Art's pantomime. With this third film, I think it is the only way one could derive enjoyment from the brutality. Having recently listened to an interview with Chris McGurk, the CEO of the film's distributor, Cineverse, this new tone does appear to be an intentional, creative, corporate choice. Not only does McGurk want Art the Clown to be the next Freddy Krueger on a marketing level, but he wants Art to act like Freddy Krueger too. Just replace the crappy one-liners with a crappy mime routine. The selling point becomes gross-out comedy, but the truth is, it's not all that funny. Terrifier 3 lives up to the popular horror franchise's penchant for bloody kills featuring its main man, Art the Clown, but also delivers a bit more lore and also a literal cliffhanger. Set 5 years after 2022's Terrifier 2, the Christmas-themed threequel features heroine Sienna Shaw, Lauren LaVera, being released from a mental health facility to spend time with her aunt and uncle. However, she's still psychologically troubled by her last run-in with the demonically superpowered Art, where this angelic warrior came back from the dead thanks to a magic sword and sliced his head off. He got better, and is now back in Miles County. And dressed in a Santa suit, and working with Victoria, Samantha Scafidi, a disfigured survivor from the first Terrifier, now possessed by an evil entity, to hunt down Sienna. Naturally, he leaves a path of blood and dismemberments in his wake. Writer-director Damien Leone introduces Sienna's father Michael, Jason Patrick, who's seen in flashbacks with his young daughter to give depth to her warrior angel side and nods to the greater mythology. That was one of the big polarizing aspects of the last film, and a lot of people just felt there were just so many unanswered questions, Leone says. By design, I'm approaching this more like a mini-series. These aren't just one-offs, so it's just a matter of how much information can I squeeze in before I get to that final confrontation that I have in mind with Art and Sienna. Need a break? Play the USA Today Daily Crossword Puzzle. We dabble in a lot of taboo subject matter, Leone adds. The way it's executed could be very off-putting where you can just alienate basically the entire audience. That's a disservice to the casual horror movie fan and to Art the Clown as a character, because I do think he has more mass appeal than just a niche splatterfest. Leone reports that some screenings might run a music video for Ice Nine Kills' new tie-in movie song, A Work of Art, after the credits roll, but there's no extra scene of the Marvel variety. In fact, he doesn't like them, though Leone did include one in Terrifier 2, where following Sienna cutting off Art's noggin in the climax, there was a post-credit sequence that showed Victoria in a mental asylum gruesomely giving birth to the villain's head. When you think Terrifier, you usually think Art the Clown and a whole lot of murder. And if there's one thing he's good at, it's the red stuff. The one issue I've always had with the Terrifier series is that it's always been lacking in narrative. It mostly felt like moving from kill to kill and trying to soak in the trauma of it all. The second one introduces more background, but it still doesn't feel like a cohesive story. Finally, Terrifier 3 feels like what the series was always meant to be. Terrifier 3 picks up 5 years after the events of 2, with the survivors just trying to live their lives. Sienna, LaVera, still has a lot of PTSD, and it only gets worse when she starts seeing Art the Clown yet again, and townsfolk start getting violently murdered. Her brother Jonathan is much more of a side character this time around, thank God, and we get a whole Christmas theme. Despite this, it doesn't feel overly holiday-themed, giving enough of its own identity to not solely be grouped as Christmas horror. This can definitely be watched at any time of the year. The entire opening sequence is ridiculously impressive. It's pretty much what you would expect from a slasher, but it ramps things up so quickly and heads firmly into, did they just do that, territory. It's one of many iconic scenes that puts shocking kills at the forefront but makes sure not to skimp on the tension. There are great shots that fully utilize the Christmas atmosphere. The acting is much better this time around, with nearly everyone that returns improving their performances. There are some really funny cameos from the world of horror like Clint Howard, Tom Savini, Daniel Roebuck, and Jason Patric. I was skeptical about Art the Clown being touted as being a legendary horror villain with so many limited appearances, but I'm finally starting to see it. David Howard Thornton brings some maniacal joy to Art that can't be matched. When Art isn't murdering, I love how much more lore is added to the series. They add just enough to give more of a clear image of his evil, without going overboard with origin. Art becomes more and more intriguing with every entry because there's still a layer of mystery surrounding him. One element I loved was the introduction of a girl obsessed with Art and his killings. There's a great moment where she talks all about Art's exploits as he gets giddy out in the hallway, hearing all of his achievements. Moments like that help to bring in the fun versus soaking in the traumatic moments. While there is certainly a fair share of brutal scenes, it's all presented in such an entertaining way. The setup and payoff are expertly handled. If I had to complain about anything, it's some of the stereotypical story beats. The fact that people still don't believe Sienna after all she's gone through results in nothing but frustration and annoyance. But it does make their murders all the more satisfying. There's also a child character that doesn't entirely work, and I wish was excised completely. And I'd still argue there's no reason for a film like this to be over 2 hours long. Despite that, Terrifier 3 is a lot of fun. By not selling out to a studio, Damien Leone continues to be absolutely relentless in his pursuit of horrific murder. Art even takes aim at children this time, quite a few times, so this isn't for the sensitive. And that's precisely the kind of franchise the horror world needs right now. Most of the time, a new film has to prove it has legs at the box office before talk of a sequel can begin in earnest. But that isn't the case when it comes to the Terrifier franchise. Having grown exponentially with each film so far, in terms of both budget and takings, a fourth entry in the saga had already been greenlit before Terrifier 3 arrived in cinemas. And that's already looking like an understandable decision, given the new film is tracking for another impressive box office performance. The franchise focuses on the exploits of the horrendously evil Art the Clown, who writer-director Damien Leone described to Radiotimes.com as like, if Jack the Ripper and Satan had a baby, as he embarks on some of the most brutally violent murder sprees you could possibly imagine. The gore and shock value has been a huge part of what has made the series successful thus far, with viral stories of punters throwing up and passing out in cinemas. And unsurprisingly, that is the case once again in the Yuletide set latest entry, as Art gets into the Christmas spirit in a typically gruesome manner. But what of the film's ending? Where do we leave Art, and how does this set up the already confirmed Terrifier 4? Read on for everything you need to know, with the warning that spoilers will obviously come thick and fast from this point onwards. Throughout the film, Art the Clown, David Howard Thornton, and his partner in crime Vicky, Samantha Scafidi, embark on perhaps their bloodiest killing spree yet, with their unfortunate victims including a family, an old man dressed as Santa Claus, and a huge group of excited children at a mall. The most gruesome deaths are spared for Jonathan Shaw's classmates Mia and Cole, who are absolutely butchered in a shower. It's nasty stuff. He then descends on Sienna, Lauren LaVera, and Jonathan, Elliott Fullam, who are now staying at their Aunt Jessica's house for the holidays, hoping to recover from the trauma of their last encounter with Art. But sadly, rest and recuperation is very much not on the menu. Sienna is captured and restrained, tied to a chair as Art prepares to finish things. To make things worse, Vicky then opens a wrapped present that contains a severed head, with most of the skin peeled off, and initially reveals that the skull belongs to Sienna's younger cousin Gabby. She then kills Jessica with an especially horrible method that involves both a live rat and a knife to the throat. In a twist, Gabby then appears, and we learn that it can't have been her head in the present after all, with Vicky revealing that it actually belonged Jonathan. But this doesn't mean that Gabby is safe, of course. And indeed, soon the child falls through a hole in the room, which appears to be some sort of portal to hell. Anyhow, amongst all this, the restrained Sienna is able to use her special sword to free herself and exact revenge by killing Vicky. Before she can use it on Art, however, he mounts an escape and hops on board a bus, where he looks to be instantly eyeing up his next victims. He ain't finished yet. As for how this sets up the next one, we can rest assured that this isn't the last time that Sienna and Art will come face to face, especially given she has now pledged to save her cousin Gabby from whatever awful world she's fallen into. We'd imagine such a rescue mission would involve at least another brush with Art. It's also quite possible that the next sequel could yet see a return for Jonathan. It's interesting that he was killed off camera. The Terrifier franchise isn't exactly one to shy away from showing deaths in all their bloodiness, and the fact that we are told that the mangled skull belongs to him shouldn't necessarily be taken at face value. This could very well be a fake-out, although we'll have to wait until the next one to find out. Damien Leone's Terrifier 3 is one of the biggest horror releases of 2024. After seemingly being defeated at the climax of Terrifier 2, the start of the third installment proves that Art the Clown, David Howard Thornton, has unfinished business. Terrifier 3 takes place over the holiday season and sees Art dressed as Santa Claus, carrying his big sack of presents with much more sinister contents that will be used to dispose of the supporting cast. The Christmas setting feels very vintage and classical, and if the imagery isn't clear enough, the movie constantly reminds you it's the festive period by playing choral Christmas carols. Art is up to his usual slasher antics in Terrifier 3, but just how brutal are the kills this time around? The end of Terrifier 2 saw Art the Clown decapitated by Sienna, LaVera, but it was fairly obvious Art wouldn't stay dead for long. The question wasn't if Art would come back to life. That was actually resolved in a mid-credit scene where Victoria birthed Art's head. The question was, how would he come back? The opening sees Art's decapitated body being discovered before attacking the man who found him. Art gets onto a subway train and is seen attaching the head of the man he attacked onto his own. It adds a new layer of Art's supernatural abilities. He eventually makes his way to Victoria's psychiatric ward and reunites his head with his body, killing the nurses, Leah Vasey and Chris Jericho, from the second movie in the process. The demon inside Victoria attempts to possess Sienna, but she is too strong to give in, due to her having something to still live for, feeling protective over the still-alive Gabby. Art takes hold of Gabby and goes to kill her, but she insists that she wants Sienna to open her present first. Earlier in the movie, Gabby had been reprimanded for opening presents and rewrapping them herself, so it was clear she knew what was in the mysterious gift box: a sword. As soon as she opens the sword, Sienna stabs Victoria, and she quickly disintegrates on the floor, opening a huge demonic hole. Meanwhile, a big fight between Art and Sienna ensues, with Art fighting Sienna's sword with a chainsaw. After a relentless battle, Art's chainsaw gets stuck in the table, and Sienna manages to stab him against the wall. However, Gabby gets pulled into the hole in the ground, and Sienna tries to save her. Using the sword, she attempts to pull Gabby up, cutting her hands on the blades. Gabby isn't strong enough and slips into the void along with the sword. Sienna vows to get her back, and the wounds on her hands begin to heal almost instantly. When she looks at the spot where Art the Clown stood, all that is left is a bloody patch on the wall and a broken window. Terrifier 3 then pans to a disheveled-looking Art waiting at the bus stop while Silent Night plays in the background. He gets on the bus where a woman is reading the Ninth Circle, a subtle nod to the first movie Art appeared in. As the bus drives away, everything is set up for another showdown in the recently announced Terrifier 4. Although some questions remain unsolved, Terrifier 3 brings more lore into the story and expands on the connection between Art and Sienna, choosing a less ambiguous ending than the previous installment, but still leaving Gabby and Sienna's fates at large. Damien Leone's Terrifier franchise rose to new heights as far as gore and brutality are concerned in Terrifier 3, but it also left audiences wanting more with its metaphorical and literal cliffhanger ending. The slasher franchise centered around the demonic clown named Art has made headlines for its shocking level of gore and violence, which has reportedly made some moviegoers throw up. However, the brilliance of the franchise is not in its disturbing content, but in the lore that has steadily built over 3 movies. Terrifier 3 picks up 5 years after the events of Terrifier 2, which saw Sienna Shaw, Lauren LaVera, finally kill Art the Clown with a magical sword after a literal journey to hell. Sienna still carries the scars from her encounter both on her body and in her mind, and just days after being released from her latest stint in a psychiatric facility, she comes face-to-face with Art again. This time, he is accompanied by the Terrifier franchise's original final girl, Victoria Hayes, who is now possessed by something that matches Art's sadism but has more supernatural power. The evil duo capture Sienna after murdering the aunt and uncle that she's staying with, and threaten to murder her young cousin who idolizes her as well, unless Sienna allows herself to be corrupted by the demonic presence that currently resides in Vicky's decimated body. After a clever deception on the part of her cousin, Gabby, Sienna is able to reclaim her sword and manages to decapitate Vicky and impale Art, seemingly putting a stop to both. However, as Vicky's blood runs across the ground, it opens a portal seemingly to the very hell from whence the demon came. While Sienna is tied up by the devilish duo, they show her a rat-chewed head in a cage, which they at first claim is her cousin, Gabby. Once the real Gabby is revealed, Vicky puts Jonathan's glasses on the head, claiming that it is actually his head in the act. While it's certainly possible that Jonathan was killed off-screen and that is his head, Vicky already lied about the head's identity once before. It's possible that she lied again, and that Jonathan is still alive somewhere, but Vicky having his glasses doesn't bode well for his longevity if so. The demon, or demons, found their way to Earth through Art, who was, as Sienna mentioned in Terrifier 3, a serial killer even before the demon corrupted him further, and Vicky, an utterly broken and depraved woman who had herself already been corrupted by Art's evil. Now that they are on Earth, they seek to do what demons do: cause pain, death, humiliation, and fear, torment and torture in their purest, most hellish forms. That driving objective is what makes Sienna so interesting to them and why she's been able to survive them so far. As Art and Vicky are possessed by demons, something is inside Sienna that makes her powerful against them. For the sake of simplification, one could say Sienna is possessed by an angel if Art is possessed by a demon. The character that her father, Jason Patrick, created for her as a young girl was an angel warrior who was stronger than any hero or villain. Sienna has now gone toe-to-toe with Art's ultra-violence twice and was able to magically heal the gashes in her hands. She has become the character her father created, complete with a magic sword and abilities. Sienna still deals with the traumatic echoes of the violence he inflicted on her and her unholy experience in the clown cafe. She won't even eat cereal anymore as it reminds her of the Art Krispies cereal. Sienna also bears the weight of tremendous guilt as she feels personally responsible for her friends and loved ones falling victim to Art on Halloween night 5 years earlier. Whether she is right to feel that or not, it's something that has consumed her for 5 years, sending her in and out of psychiatric facilities and on constant medication. On top of it all, Sienna's emotional arc is about the trauma of grief she carries around with her every day. She lost her mother the day of Art's killing spree, but her entire family bore the cross of grief from the passing of her father. As Sienna tells her aunt in Terrifier 3, her mother was a different, sweeter person before her father died. Sienna's entire character arc over 2 movies has been how she processes grief and loss, which is a universal theme for humanity. The central ethos of filmmaker Damien Leone's Terrifier films involves a combination of profanity and subversion. In other words, anything goes, especially when you least expect it to. That guiding principle has been present as far back as the first, non-canon appearances of Art the Clown, initially played by Leone's friend Mike Gianelli in the Terrifier short film that ended up being part of the anthology movie All Hallows' Eve from 2013. Even though Art was recast with actor David Howard Thornton for the first proper Terrifier film in 2016, the concept remained. Here was a slasher movie villain who didn't play by the rules. Where most prior slasher villains were either completely silent and emotionless or very chatty and expressive, Art was somehow both. Where, in most other slashers, a silent covenant exists between the filmmaker and audience, which assumes that a final girl will rise to the challenge of temporarily defeating the killer, and that this killer will only use sharp and blunt objects to do his business, Art pulled an Indiana Jones and whipped out a pistol, dispatching one final girl with horrific brevity and brutally mutilating the character who took her place. 2022's Terrifier 2 continued this game of zigging where most would have expected a zag, the film being one of the longest slasher movies ever made, 138 minutes, that introduces hints of a larger, deeper mythology surrounding Art, his goals, and his origins, but without providing many answers. This month's Terrifier 3 provides these answers, and then some. Leone once again takes the series in a new direction, bringing back several characters from the previous films while changing the setting from Halloween night to Christmas Eve. In addition to making explicit what was only inferred or hinted at in Terrifier 2, Leone rather ingeniously recontextualizes the character of Art, if not the films themselves, without losing that perverse sense of shock or surprise that keeps drawing curious audiences in. Although this film, like Terrifier 2, ends on a cliffhanger, it's a testament to Leone's clarity and consistency of vision that a potential Terrifier 4 could literally take things anywhere next. Terrifier 3 begins, appropriately enough, with a stalk and kill sequence featuring Art, dressed as Santa Claus, invading the home of a young couple and their 2 children. In addition to establishing this movie's Yuletide setting, it's a scene that is as brutal as it is random, reminding audiences of Art's modus operandi both in spirit and in function, for a very good reason to be addressed later. For now, Leone flashes back to 5 years earlier, where Art, at the conclusion of Terrifier 2, had been decapitated and his head was reborn through his prior victim, the defaced Victoria Hayes, Samantha Scafidi, the sole survivor of the first Terrifier who was institutionalized after subsequently committing a murder herself. As a result of all this, not only is Art's head reunited with his still animate body, but Victoria seems to be permanently possessed by an evil force, her last cries for help heard by a nurse before he's violently murdered by a resurrected Art. As Leone stated on his commentary track for Terrifier 2, his original idea for the shocking cliffhanger of that film was that Victoria was now possessed by the spirit of the little pale girl, Amelie McLean, the demonic companion who followed Art around and seemed to have taken the form of one of his, or at least someone's, prior victims, a girl murdered years ago at the Terrifier Carnival attraction, where Terrifier 2 reached its climax. Although the newly possessed Victoria has a few of the same mannerisms as the little pale girl did, she appears to be her own demonic character. For one thing, she can talk just fine, spouting various epithets that would make Regan McNeil blush. For another, she appears to literally and figuratively get off on the violence Art perpetrates. She's his audience as well as his accomplice. As the two make their way back to Art's hideout inside an abandoned home, which may or may not have been the site of grisly child murders several years prior, it's clear that they have some particular agenda, as both Victoria and Art patiently wait motionless for 5 whole years before springing to action again. Meanwhile, Sienna Shaw, Lauren LaVera, has tried to move on from Art's attack on Halloween night 5 years ago, but it hasn't been easy. She's been in and out of several institutions, and although she's on medication, she's still periodically seeing the ghosts of her dead friends, including Brooke, Kaylee Hyman, who appears as a bitter, bloody corpse, an American werewolf in London style. This Christmas, she's finally getting a chance to try and return to normalcy with some of her extended family, moving in with her late mother's sister, Jess, Margaret Ann Florence, her uncle, Greg, Bryce Johnson, and her cousin, Gabby, Antonella Rose. Gabby and Sienna have a special bond, with Gabby essentially worshipping Sienna as her hero, despite the older girl's recent troubles. Sadly, those troubles have not completely gone away for Sienna, much to the consternation of not just Jess and Greg, who secretly discuss what to do about Sienna going forward, but also her younger brother Jonathan, Elliott Fullam, the other survivor of the Art murder spree 5 years ago, who is making a go of it on his own at college. Sienna begins to believe that Art is still alive and is making a beeline for her, a suspicion which we're shown is right on the money, as Art makes various killings and procures a Santa suit for himself, implying that the opening kill sequence takes place around this time. As such, she confronts Jonathan with letters that he'd written to her immediately after the attacks 5 years ago, which state his belief that they needed to kill the little pale girl, or at least the demonic spirit that she represents, before she was able to jump into a host body and possess it. Sienna speculates that the demon must now be inhabiting Victoria Highs and that both it and Art are out to eliminate her due to her being somehow chosen by the forces of good as their enemy. Read more /film.com/1686771/Terrifier-3 ending explained. As Art and Victoria seemingly remove what remains of Sienna's loved ones, support system, and sanity, the demon inside Victoria reveals that the entire game they've been playing is for Art to commit as many atrocities, personal and otherwise, as possible, so as to allow the demon to possess Sienna. In doing so, evil will fully triumph over good, as the chosen champion of the angels will have been officially defeated. The demon attempts to push its way inside Sienna, but the girl still has enough of her strength to fight it off for now. Anticipating this, Art and Victoria reveal that they have a contingency plan. Gabby is still alive, as shown by her being brought into the living room of horrors by Art. This means that, tragically, the rat-eaten severed head belongs to poor Jonathan, as Victoria makes clear by placing the dead boy's signature eyeglasses on the skull, after Art holds a knife to Gabby's throat and poor Sienna cannot break free of her bonds. It seems that evil is about to take the win. Yet the two cousins have an ace in the hole. Gabby, a consummate snoop, already peeked inside the present. Sienna snuck under the tree, and having read Sienna's diary earlier, knows all about the significance of the sword. So, appealing to Art's sense of mayhem, she insists that Sienna open her Christmas present before both of them are murdered. Art and Victoria happily agree, only with the proviso that Art smashes Sienna's hands to a pulp before she can open the present. Sienna takes that deal, however, knowing that it'll allow her to open the box and retrieve the sword. As soon as she does, she attacks Victoria first, swiftly decapitating the girl. She then goes after Art, and the two foes have a brutal no-holds-barred duel to the death. Just as Sienna impales Art with the magic sword, the clown's eyes turning pale white as an indication of his power being depleted, Gabby is shocked to discover that Victoria's blood has flowed in a particular pattern onto the floor, its own magical properties suddenly opening a portal to hell. Having to make a choice between finishing off Art and rescuing Gabby from the swiftly opening portal, Sienna rushes to Gabby's aid, handing her the sword to help her hang on. Sadly, it's not enough, and both Gabby and the magic sword are swallowed up by the Hell Portal, a climax that echoes the similarly eerie, bleak conclusion of John Carpenter's Prince of Darkness. A distraught Sienna, seeing that Art has escaped in addition to losing her beloved cousin and her weapon, silently vows that she's going to find Gabby, wherever she's gone. Terrifier 3 is hands down the goriest film in the franchise. Art the Clown, David Howard Thornton, is at his least merciful, and nobody is safe in the film, not even children. Director Damien Leone raised the bar when it comes to the bloodshed death scenes and overall brutality. For example, one little boy is butchered in a horrific home invasion sequence at the beginning of the film, and many joyful kids are involved in a Santa Mall explosion toward the middle of the movie. That isn't even counting the memorable bathroom scene where a character meets a grisly fate via chainsaw. Needless to say, viewers should be aware of many trigger warnings before viewing Terrifier 3, because the film is unrelenting with its blood spatter, amputations, and desecration of the holidays. For those who aren't familiar with the story, Terrifier 3 picks up 5 years after the events of the second movie. Final girl Sienna Shaw, Lauren LaVera, has just gotten out of a mental hospital and is going to stay with her Aunt Jess, Margaret Ann Florence, Uncle Greg, Bryce Johnson, and her little cousin Gabby, Antonella Rose, who completely idolizes her. As Sienna makes herself home for the holidays, Art the Clown and his new accomplice, Victoria Vicky Hayes, Samantha Scafidi, are woken up from a deep sleep inside the abandoned, desolate building where they have taken shelter. As they're woken, they kill off 2 building inspectors, leaving Art the Clown to grab his black garbage sack and once again wreak havoc in Miles County. Only this time, because he's in the festive spirit, he's impersonating Santa Claus. Art the Clown is solo in this scene, but some other notable kills happen with the assistance of Vicky, the desecrated survivor of the first movie, who is now being used as Art's vessel. Viewers learn toward the middle of the film from Jonathan that Vicky is a kind of tether, keeps Art the Clown living in this world rather than the mysterious realm from which he came. Vicky serves as a mouthpiece for Art, and it's assumed that he is projecting his voice through her mouth. At the end of Terrifier 3, Vicky seems to have been killed by Sienna. Once she evaporates, a huge chasm filled with smoke opens in the ground. Anyone familiar with the other movies will remember a similar new realm opening up at the Terrifier haunted house at the end of the second movie. The safest bet is that this portal is some kind of doorway into hell, which is where Art the Clown comes from. Vicky may or may not be back for the next movie. Viewers also don't know whether Art's other vessel, the little pale girl, will be back as well. She was not at all in Terrifier 3, which leaves her fate just as mysterious. Viewers learned more about Sienna Shaw's connection to Art the Clown in Terrifier 2, but it was only briefly at the end. It's revealed in that film that Sienna's late father, who was an artist, may have been familiar with the malicious clown. Her father drew a picture of a female warrior character wearing body armor and a lightning bolt painted across her face, which Sienna used as inspiration for her Halloween costume that year. When Sienna battles against Art the Clown at the Terrifier haunted house, she wears that costume and looks every bit the warrior that her father illustrated. She also finds a magical sword that only she is able to wield, and that's proven to be what can defeat Art. In Terrifier 3, viewers learn more about Sienna's connection to Art the Clown and about the magical sword that she wields. It becomes obvious that Sienna is the only one who will be able to defeat this clownish demon. It's unclear why exactly she's the one who must battle him, but there is a strange moment at the end of the movie where the cuts she got from wielding the sword mysteriously disappear. This moment is telling because it shows that there is some otherworldly power that Sienna possesses that causes her to regenerate. Because she's left without visible damage, it's also possible that she will be blamed for the crimes. Earlier on, the true crime podcast host at Jonathan's college, Mia, hints at this by saying something about all the killings happening around Sienna, but her never being convicted. The end of Terrifier 3 leaves the possibility open that Sienna may take the fall for all the deaths, especially the ones that occur at her aunt and uncle's house, has no qualms about killing people in the most horrific ways, which is especially apparent in Terrifier 3. Throughout the movie, there are kills that are so unbelievably gruesome that there were reports of moviegoers vomiting and fainting in early screenings. One such violent scene is when Art the Clown targets a man who dresses as Santa Claus in a bar. The clown acts excited to see Santa at first, but eventually he pulls out a gun, takes out the bartender and another patron, and then proceeds to tie Santa to a chair, douse him with liquid nitrogen, and smash his body parts with a hammer. It's that kind of violence that Art the Clown brings to the ending of Terrifier 3. The aforementioned college student who was brutalized in the bathroom has his corpse crucified against the wall in Sienna's aunt's home as a decorative backdrop. Vicky terrorizes Sienna while she's tied to the chair by putting a crown of thorns on her head and making her watch as she beats her Aunt Jess to a bloody pulp. She then proceeds to shove a tube in Jess's mouth and feed her live rats, which then claw their way out of her throat. To add insult to injury, Vicky has also placed a birdcage with a skinned skull on the table, first telling Sienna that it's her cousin Gabby, but later saying that it's actually Jonathan. The audience can now assume that Sienna's brother Jonathan has been killed at the end of Terrifier 3. Another character who may be dead at the end of Terrifier 3 is Sienna Shaw's young cousin Gabby. With Gabby's assistance, Sienna manages to get out of her bindings and get the sword that she had wrapped as a Christmas present earlier in the film. She takes down Vicky, and while she's battling Art the Clown, Gabby is sucked down into another portal leading to a hellish realm. Sienna tries to rescue her using the blade of the sword, cutting her hands in the process. But she loses her grip, and Gabby and the sword tumble down into the gaping chasm that opens up in the floor. Now that Gabby is gone, and the only weapon that can kill Art the Clown is with her, it can be assumed that Sienna will be entering this portal to hell in Terrifier 4. Art the Clown's slaughterhouse, ingenuity, he pulls out an instrument of death. That's so classic a chainsaw that we wonder what he's going to do with it. That's new. Well, here's the thing, in every chainsaw murder you've ever seen on screen, you only see so much. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, in its poetic nightmare greatness, is famous for being understated in its gore. But Damien, Leone, and Art the Clown are going to show you what no chainsaw sequel, No scene that helped to get Scarface an X-ring. Ever did we begin with two nude college students fornicating in a shower, at which point Art as Santa saws through the shower door, then starts sawing off hands and limbs, then places that chainsaw right between the dude's buttocks, at which point the party is just getting started. The movie's climax features squiggly rats, a big glass tube, shoved down someone's throat, and a head that's been carved down to a brain so that we go, who is that? The detail that reveals the identity is in an awful way witty. Terrifier 3 is 2 hours long, and you might wonder why a porn of violence exploitation movie, the kind of thing that's usually on the short side, would be such a protracted smorgasbord of showboat mutilation, but that's part of what's Terrifier fans crave, a complete immersion in depravity. The horror is on screen, but in another sense it's in the audience. It's in the very fact that a sizable slice of mainstream viewers now regard this as entertainment. I don't mean to sound so judgmental. I'm one of them, going back to the days of Friday the 13th Part 3 and A Nightmare on Elm Street 4. I always found slasher sequels tedious. Yet the prospect of another Terrifier movie doesn't dispirit me in the same way it leaves me in a kind of suspense. What in hell's name will Art the Clown do? Next, this film directed by Damien Leone, written by Damien Leone, produced by Damien Leone, Phil Falcone, Stephen Della, Salla, Jason Levy, Michael, Levy, George Deber, starring Laura David Howard, Thornton, Elliott Fullam, Samantha Scatty and Della Rose Margaret, and Florence Bryce Johnson. Cinematography, George Dober, edited by Damien Leone, music by Paul Wild Production Companies. Dark Age Cinema, Bloody Disgusting Fuzz on the Lens Productions, The Coven, distributed by Circe. Release dates September 19th, 2024 in Fantastic Fest. October 11th, 2012 in United States. Running time 125 minutes. Country United States. Language English. Budget $2 million. Box office $27.2 million. So guys, this is the review of Terrifier 3 movie and some information about it. How do you like our today's video? Please let us know by commenting. And if you like this video, please like it, share it, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching.